100%.
So, Michael, meet Michael. What's up,
Nice
dudes?
to meet you, Mike.
Howdy, fella. Nice to meet you. Thanks for coming on, man. It's great to chat with you.
Just before Mike Armstrong arrived, Mike Robertson was sharing a bit of his experience in terms of, like, you know, my invite for him to chat with us. And which, do you mind, like, go for it, man? You're here. You're
Basically,
here.
I was
Let's get on in it.
questioning the wisdom of you guys inviting me to the show. I appreciate it. I'm a huge podcast fan, so it's great to actually be on one. I never thought it'd be the case, but I don't know, for you guys from a marketing standpoint, if that's the best to have me on, because I listened to a couple of the other ones, and like these guys are actually in the fields or have like knowledge of the field that you're talking about, and I have none of that. So, but I'm glad to be here and take part in it.
Well, I think the beauty of me hearing that as someone just meeting you is that you're open to the concept of being your own coach, which is the most important thing, man.
Yeah, sure.
Right. From a marketing standpoint, just want to be clear, like the intentions are elsewhere for this. Honestly, at the end of the day, I imagine most people's time is more valuable than listening to this whole conversation of the three of us hashing it out. But, like, we're doing it for the enjoyment of the three of us sharing ideas. And then, again, like, just what we're having fun doing right now and unraveling our thread is, like, crafting a common message and like, highlighting what other people are saying versus, like, what we're saying. You know, like, you're going to give us a couple awesome 15-second sound clips and, like, quotes that you said during this conversation that, like, we're just using as a message of people understanding, you know, like, you have an opportunity to pay attention to something, like, you choose. And so, like, the reason why I thought you would be a good person to chat with is how have you come to choose to be a 32-year-old man who's climbing the playground, you know, weekly for exercise and just personal development? You can start off anywhere you like.
34, going on 35 very quickly. But thank you for only thinking
chicken,
32. Yeah, I guess, I don't know. I mean, I've known you for a number of years. Can't remember exactly how many, 5 or 6, I suppose, at this point. And it's always been something that comes up just organically, you know, fitness, whatever, through any time that we would hang out. And eventually, I think actually around when the pandemic happened, at one of our annual gatherings, I ended up hurting my knee. It was kind of out of exercise for a while, doing like physical therapy, whatever. And then around that time, you started, Kurt, doing you were doing weekly Facebook meetups because people couldn't really get together, especially like your Roots crew from the gym. So you gave me access to that. And I started kind of following along, and there was a lot of like breath work, movement stuff, things I had never, ever considered or placed along the realm of fitness. But I sort of was doing it and liked doing it. And then it just sort of happened from there. I think I was talking to you about it, and then you sort of were talking to me. And then eventually it was kind of like, hey, let's make this a thing. And so I sort of signed up to sign on to your philosophies, I guess. And so I suppose that's why I started climbing the things and things like that. I'm not very good at it, but I've always had shoulder issues. And that's like one little thing where you're like, man, this is such a basic idea. Like you put it, you were like, every kid can get up on the rings and flip themselves around, but no adults can. You're like, yeah, that's kind of eye-opening. Like you're almost reverting back 25, 30 years to things that you should be able to do and trying them again. And it's like, man, it's just totally different than anything I had ever expected or like done really before. I always thought of fitness as like, either you're running till you can't run anymore, or you're trying to lift as heavy as a weight as possible. That's sort of the two modalities that you can use, and there's no other way to do it. But I guess you've sort of shed some light on that for me. And then it goes into a whole nother realm, which I think is more similar to what you guys are chatting about on this on the show.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Thank you for sharing that. Like, I'm legitimately curious. We backtracked a little bit, and like, honestly, from your perspective, like, how have in those 5 or 6 years that we've known each other and, see each other in person, like for context, Mike, 3-4 times a year, maybe up to 6 times or something. So we like met in person, 30 times?
Probably.
Likely breached the subject a majority of the time, but like, I'm curious, like, how have you seen those conversations between you and me evolve? Because I imagine even at that time, we were still talking a lot more about the strength and conditioning stuff.
I would say, I don't know if the conversation ever really evolved. I'm trying to remember just back in the beginning stages how it would come up. I think definitely you were always more, and this should be obvious because you're a professional in the industry, but you were always way ahead of where I was thinking with it. You were always way more into movement type of stuff. I mean, you were also way stronger than I ever was anyway, but also you were always exploring the movement kind of thing and just the different ways about it. I think if I remember, it was a couple of years ago when we were down at the cabin. I remember it coming up specifically about how kind of much more outside the box you thought about it than I did when you brought the the club thing down there, and we're messing with that while we were playing hockey. Then the 2 years you had a rope with you, and just sort of so from those things, you kind of started talking about it, not specifically telling me or trying to pitch me on it, but just talking about it, and then I sort of started to hear what you were saying, I guess, after a while, and realized, okay, I'm not a football player anymore. I don't play high school or whatever sports. I'm not trying to pass some fitness challenge for a sport. I did a running thing for a long time. I didn't like it, just injury-wise and stuff like that. And so I sort of had a couple of injuries playing sports, and I realized, I got to shift gears and do something a little bit different. So I think it was kind of probably an injury, I would say, on myself that made me try out what you had been telling me for a while, and that sort of made the connection. Because I have not felt any sort of joint pains or anything like that, but also at the same time feel stronger than I ever have, and not like a lifting kind of way, just like a general sort of daily life sort of way.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
I have one question just from both of your threads, Mike, that you touched on. Right from where Kurt entered with 32, 34, whatever, doesn't matter, your old guy playing on the playground, right? Have you found yourself noticing opportunities to play in other realms? Like, you're playing in your fitness realm. Are you playing more in other realms of your life too because of it? Is it translating any?
I don't know. I guess I would find myself looking for more opportunities to just play generally. And I've always kind of had that spirit, I suppose, for lack of a better term. I've always really liked playing games of any sort of physical kind of game, challenge, whatever. I really like it ever since I was a little kid. So it's maybe brought a little bit of that back.
Nice.
But I don't necessarily, I don't do it at work really, because I work in an office and there's just not, I suppose, running up the stairs or something, taking 2 at a time, focusing maybe on the right way to do it. Kurt's kind of told me maybe that, but I would say more, I have a dog, a very active dog, and a 2-year-old daughter. So they're always playing. So I guess in that, I kind of start doing it more, or at least think about it more. or maybe I was always doing it, but now I'm like, oh, let me try this. Or, my daughter's like really into somersaults and shit. So now I'll like try somersaults out, like stuff like that. And, or try hanging from things, whatever. So I suppose I'm doing it there. Not necessarily intentionally, or not that I've ever thought about, but
I wonder how much of this is like related to the bigger picture of like some of the other things you just alluded to. Mike and I have been chewing on this idea of like it's one thing to know about it, and then like maybe write and tell other people your excitement about it, and then like it's another to step through the door and like start being about it. And you and I had spoken a few months ago, I think it was, and just about even like noticing the opportunity to set boundaries with your phone around vacation or whatever. So I'm just wondering, like, in that time where you're playing with your dog or your daughter, like, it's funny because you may be looking at it like, oh, this is not like, play for me. But like, I imagine it's just more intentional. You're putting your phone away, so like you're being dad right now.
100%. Yeah. Yeah, I will say, like, I didn't mean to make it strictly about fitness, because actually what you kind of opened my eyes to is that all of those ideas that you have about fitness realm of things that you kind of introduced me to, then through working with you, you slowly introduce them into the regular life realm. So things like that, like, yeah, the intentionality of just everyday existence. I wouldn't say I am 100% like as in as you are. Like it's slowly creeping in. You know what I mean? I definitely revert back to a lot of lazy tendencies, stuff like that.
Yo, same. I think you have a false opinion on the reality of my life. I mean, again, like what we're doing on purpose is like talking about it and writing about it, which is always going to be a step behind being about it, which is always going to be a step behind our ability to share it with other people. So like, just know, man, when you are critical of yourself, like that's the level of awareness we're after. You're like, I'm not doing it as well as that person. Guess what? Guilty of that too. Like, I'm not doing it as well as Mike is doing it today. Or, we all falter in that. Perhaps, like, Mike, would it be fair to say, like, with asking the play question, you were also after the idea of, like, just being intentional?
100%. And also the concept, Mike, that you illustrated beautifully, whether you meant to or not, of that paying attention to one thing more intentionally creates by accident attention and intention in a bunch of other places. So like,
oh yeah,
you're just noticing things more often that like, even now you said a few times like, well, I guess that's playing more. Like you're realizing it even now, but you noticed those moments enough to bring them up. So it's beautiful. In my opinion, that's my experience, is as I pay attention to my breath more, I'm more apt to notice a songbird. I'm more apt to notice the sun on my face. But then I'm also more apt to notice things down the pike further because I'm paying attention to other things too. But, I've been practicing that and have a long way to go, as Kurt said. So that's a really cool way that you put it, Mike. I think it's beautiful that you're getting to experience those moments more fully.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree. I guess, like, it's almost thinking out loud kind of, where I don't realize it when you ask the question, but then as I talk about it, I'm like, oh, I suppose I am doing it. Because I think of it as, well, I'm not great at it yet. I'm putting more effort into it in general. I'm still not perfect at it. It's a work in progress about everything, but it's interesting because it makes a lot of sense too. I guess that's what kind of why it hits home is like, yeah, putting your phone away or, not using it around the kids or, just using it less in general is a good thing. I think it's an objectively good thing. Like most adults would agree that they use their phone too much. Not everybody tries anything to use it less, So like I've done a couple of different things, like switching my apps around and stuff like that, in the hopes that using it less, like got rid of the Facebook account, things like that. I've noticed the difference for sure. Every now and then I will definitely revert back to just using it mindlessly, but there's definitely a lot more thought behind it.
I imagine you're exercising a bit of inherited American affect in that, like, potentially downplaying where you're at in this journey. Because all of those things, man, like, they make you rare. And so, like, the difficult thing was making the rare decision. Kudos to you if you don't consider, like, it to be something that, like, sets you apart from the norm. But, like, my pattern recognition is, like, it's a more convenient thing to still have the Facebook app on your phone and then bitch about no time.
Yeah, I agree.
It's just more convenient to do that. So, like,
because that's what everyone's doing.
But you've chosen not to. Like, that's why we're talking with you here.
Well, that was sort of, things like that were really eye-opening to me, because there so many times I could remember just like sitting, I'll be like in the same room as my wife, and she's on her phone, I'm on mine, and you look up and like 20 minutes are gone by, and I'm like, what did I just do? I didn't do anything. I saw a bunch of pictures of things on Instagram, whatever, and that was fun, but like I didn't do anything. And then at the end of the day, I'm like, well, I wish I would have read more today. And like, well, that's 20 minutes of reading is pretty good. Like, as a full-time working father of a young toddler, like 20 minutes a day is, if you can get that, that's good. So you're like, all right, let me just put this thing down, pick up the book for a little bit, even if it's 3, 4, 5 days a week. Like, so you do realize you waste so much time doing this stuff. And I guess it's a kind of a shame that, like you said, doing this, like thinking about not using your phone is more the norm than just not using your phone, than using it just for, like what we did, 12, 14, 15 years ago, using it just to call or text, and that's it. Now you're like an oddball if I don't have the Facebook app, or if I, you set, like, I know you set the airplane mode. And admittedly, when you first told me about it, I was like, Kurt's just, he's an outside the box kind of guy. His Instagram, KB in a tree, like, he turns the airplane mode on his phone, like, but now I think about it, I'm like, no, that's probably the way to go. Like, I don't need to have it at 10 o'clock at night. There's nothing, unless like a family emergency happens, that's the only thing that could happen that's really necessary at that time.
Love it. Mike, what do you think? Army.
It's just awesome because Kurt and I have been sprinkling into our conversations this week and last bits about our phone and just attention in general, and how valuable attention is, but how invaluable most of us treat it, including all of ourselves, until we kind of woke up enough to at least find out how valuable it is. And once you recognize, like, okay, my phone in nowadays life is one of my primary distractions, maybe with computer and television. But then it at least like opens the door to that thread of what other distractions, worries, other people's assumptions about me am I spending time on and giving attention to that also are unimportant to me.
Yeah, I don't know that I've gotten that far yet, to be honest. With like, I definitely know that it's there, but I haven't consciously like sat down and thought of what are 5 other things that are like taking up my time senselessly. I'm sure the couple that you named right there are probably ones that hit home for me too. But
it's probably going to be a question I ask you on your sheet next week, so be prepared to answer.
Give me a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and I'll meet you where I'm at, dude. I'm just getting there too. So this is the beauty of it. We're all at different spots on the racetrack of different categories of things. I've paid the most attention to my breath, so I'm furthest along on that one, but compared to others, still way behind. So no sense comparing and just taking my temperature and like, what am I doing this for?
Yeah. The breath thing, I'm not good at it yet, but that was kind of what hit with Kurt. Like at the beginning of the pandemic, he did a lot of that on his Facebook follow-on videos.
Yeah.
And it was something that I literally in my life never thought of, never considered. It's silly to think about it now that you never consider it, but it was such a, you kind of figure, okay, it's involuntary. You just breathe and that's it. There's nowhere to change it, or it doesn't affect you anymore. And then it was weird because like I'm starting to do this, I'm following these videos that Kurt's doing, you're doing it, and you're like, huh, it's weird. I feel like kind of lightheaded. I remember like telling my wife about it, and she's a social worker, so she kind of like she has an awareness of a lot of these concepts already. And I'm telling her about it. She's like, yeah, that's probably because you're not doing it right normally. Like you're doing it right now, and so you're getting too much oxygen when you're not really normally doing it right. And like that's kind of, and so I ended up like reading about it, and then after that, like all these, it started to become a huge thing. I think because of the pandemic, people were paying attention more to mindfulness, ways to minimize anxiety, stuff like that, because you're cooped up. And so breath inevitably became a big part of that. There's a best-selling book out right now that I noticed. I heard a podcast about it, like things like, so it just started to like come up in a big way. So I try it out, and I mean, you do notice, I'm sure, Mike, you can tell, you notice a difference. Like, it does play a huge role. Like, I tend to be somebody who, I have a long to-do list every day, and I want to get it all done. I'm rushing around to get it done. I'm always thinking of how can I best manage my time the rest of the day to get my 6 things or 8 things, whatever it is, done that I want to get done or accomplish in my day. And you realize, like, that's all well and good, but I would be rushing to get it all done and never and I'm like, man, why? I'm always just anxious about it, getting it done. And then you realize, like, you got to kind of stop and sort of take a minute in between each one, and you'll eventually get there. Like, it's actually causing you more difficulty getting these things done to rush around and do it than it is to stop, take a minute, slow down, think about it, process it, okay, and then move to the next task. Like, stuff like that is pretty eye-opening. I'm not good at it by any means yet, because it's 34 years of operating one way, but little tidbits like that Kurt has mentioned, I think, really do make a difference. Like the I forget what you call them, when you take between you're doing one task, you switch gears, you go to do another task, whether it be
page breaths.
Yes, yeah. I couldn't remember the name. To stop and take like 2 or 3, like that is, I mean, takes about 10-15 seconds to do if you take your time, and maybe 20-30, and it's a huge game changer. Like, days when I have a ton going on at work, normally I'll slam the car into the parking space, throw my e-brake on, grab my couple of bags, grab my coffee, race into work. And you're like, no, just take 30 seconds, turn the music off, whatever, take 30 seconds, breathe, focus a little bit. You almost, I don't know if it's a placebo effect or not, but you almost physically can feel the difference of like a weight off your shoulder kind of thing.
Yes.
100%.
So this is something, I mean, so all the things we've been talking about, first of all, like, doing some rings, breath work, putting the phone away, are all landing for me in the same vein of like, let's put our mind where our body is. Mike is super also interested and has really kind of introduced me indirectly to the concept of, centering. And now the metaphors that we're working around are like very directly related to like, let's actually find a center of like where thoughts originate, where, and so like, I'm just letting you know that this rabbit hole continues to, what is actually true in the world. And like, I believe I've shifted over to, I assume that more of what I believe to be true today is an illusion than it is a truth, than it is a gospel. And all of that has just come through the. What's that?
Can you give an example? So I'm on like.
Yeah, well, I mean, all of that has just come through the lens of like, I used to be the guy rushing around too, because like, yeah, work hard, get on that grind mentality. And then like have been introduced to breath work, like you say you're not good at it. Again, it's relative. Let's just be real. I maybe have a little bit more experience than you, but a lot less than most people, right? But being introduced to this like opportunity to slow your life down or slow, the story playing out in the background down a little bit, like that's empowering. And I've been mind blown in that way. I've been mind blown in movement. Like, really, what do we really know anything about? Right? Except for your experience and whether like, hey, I enjoyed this and it was fulfilling for me and my family and the people around me. Sincere question. Like, that's what I was saying about just throw some ideas out. You're an intelligent bro. Mike's an intelligent bro. That's right. That wasn't really a question, but what do you think, Michael Armstrong?
I think it's a very appropriate topic, and in the sense of something we've been talking about for sure. I've been pondering it myself, and I think a way that I would translate it just for myself is the only thing you can know is there's more to know. So
okay, yeah. Let me throw an example out here. So like the idea that, it's a big deal to vote, right? And lots of people like, oh man, like you need to have your voice heard. It totally matters, right? And then when you start to like really dig down these rabbit holes about like, do I really need to have my phone? Like what else is just sort of like I was doing by habit? And then it's like you realize you vote every single day with what you devote time and attention to. So like all these people, wanting to virtue signal or whatever your political party, but then like, what are you actually doing? Like, you're still going to buy your Christmas presents on Amazon if I can go to the store and get a bunch of stuff that has plastic on it. And like, because you chose the easier thing. And that's basically like everybody's at where they're at, but we have infinite opportunities to choose the more difficult thing that we want the world to look like. And like, fact is, most people aren't doing it. You're someone who's doing it, and I respect that. There are more. There's more to uncover is all I'm fucking getting at. And there's, I imagine to be mind blown 80,000 times for the rest of my life because.
Yeah, you should. I mean, really, right? Like, I don't know. I think Mike put it well that the more you kind of search for information, you realize there's more to know. There's always more to know. I mean, so it's a hard question, I guess, to respond to because like I don't know. I don't know where I'm at with that. Like I definitely don't think there should be any kudos or anything necessarily for like taking different steps that we talked about. It's more a curiosity, I guess, and then kind of like I've always been curious, I suppose. Like I like to kind of seek out information. Like if there's something I'm interested in, I'm going to read about it. That's not to be able to hit somebody over the head with it, although I definitely do that and shouldn't. But because I'm just curious, you're like, oh, who wrote this book? Why'd they write it? What's it about? Like, I can remember being a little kid asking my parents stuff like this, and it's like, I think it just kind of goes along that thing, like, just being curious. And
that's why the music game's so fun, like, because you are curious and, passionate about music.
Yeah.
Mike Armstrong, just for some context, we play that game where you have to pick a related song. I've told you about that.
Love it.
And Michael Robertson is a master of music knowledge. And so like
It's really not true. I don't know how this started, because it's really not, like, you guys are unbelievable, and you don't even, I don't know. It's a deferential sort of thing on your part to say that.
That American affect thing playing, man. It's all right. Yeah. You know your shit, and you've earned it.
Yeah. No, I really don't. But again, like, it just interests me, so I just read about it, and it's one of those things I remember that for whatever reason, because I'm interested in it. I remember stuff about it. Whereas other things I'll read about, and some, I don't know, global conflict going on, I read about it, and you take it in for a minute, and I won't remember it. But I could tell
you chose to read about it and be
I guess it comes back to that.
Like, oh man.
That's your vote. Your vote is for music instead of bullshit global geopolitical shit. That's the whole point of what Kurt was poking.
You're voting for yourself every single day. Like, what's such a big deal about external factors when there are so many opportunities internal? And then in the yin and yang fashion, like, that's what makes those things of value. That's what makes the external tool appropriate. Oh, kettlebell's great, but only if you use it to actually love yourself and care about, care about your experience and making it better versus like punishing yourself with it.
Yeah. I think that it kind of, to me at least, goes along with like what you often mention, Kurt, is like, forget middle out or center out, like
center out,
which is kind of like, it was a sort of a foreign concept to me, I guess, at first, because I always tended to think of like, no, it's always about sacrifice. It's always about helping other people first. But your point was correct that, well, unless you're able to help somebody out in that situation, whatever the situation is, physically able, mentally able, whatever, financially able, you can't care for somebody else or help somebody else out until you are in a position to do that. And it's kind of like, so it does sort of go back to all these choices. Like, you got to make the right choices for yourself to even be able to do that, to be, a good family person. Part of that is doing things for your own health, because, what the right thing is for your family is probably being around, being healthy, not burdening them, financially with bad choices, with bad health that ends up, so it's always kind of related back to your choices into focusing on yourself, I guess, a little bit. It's interesting. It does kind of, all these ideas generally relate, I guess, to like the same core concepts.
Yes. Well, yeah. Go ahead, Mike.
I 100% agree, and it's awesome to see you putting center out into place for yourself. Center out can be also digested as like being the best you possible, right? For everyone in your life, especially those in that inner circle. But then flashing back to, what Kurt said, beautiful thing about center out and imagining it in that sense is like it gives you a physical point of center, like the center of our body. And then you can also think about the center of inside yourself, where like love exists, and your heart and your gut and your brain, and you can work from there as well as not just like best me. We all know that's included, but like we can dive into that center too, right? And then you do the act of centering, aka your transitional breaths. You walk into a room, you center, now you're ready to work center out in that room. And taking what you talked about earlier, Mike, I loved, your description of rushing around. Like, that's my life, my upbringing, like riding around in the car with my mom. She's fucking boom, 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 boom. And then I would find myself doing the same things as I grew up. And the most wonderful thing that I think the breathing has brought me that you touched on is like a shift from I have to do these 8 things to I get to do these 8 things. Have you noticed a change for yourself like that? As you're slowing down, you're like, oh shit, I get to get coffee, and maybe you have a cool conversation with somebody at the shop.
I guess not. I've noticed them, but not necessarily connected to like the breath portion of it. I guess I haven't made the jump yet, which I'm sure I will now, because you've made it for me. But
that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I haven't necessarily thought of it on that level yet. Like where, okay, stopping allows me the opportunity to think, okay, I'm grateful to be able to do this. It was more just a kind of like what I mentioned before, like it's almost more physical to me. Like I could feel when I'm rushing around trying to do all these things, you could feel, your kind of anxiety, your stress levels building up to be able to meet these goals. Whereas when you stop a minute, you're still going to have those goals. Like the goals aren't necessarily going away, but I'm better able to kind of go through, process them because I take a minute, But I had made the connection between being grateful for the opportunity to be able to do things in terms of like the breath helping that. But I'll try to think of it more that way because I know like just through Kurt's Instagram posts and just like text messaging and whatever conversation back and forth, that shift in mindset is key to kind of all this, and that makes a lot of sense. Like there are so many, and I'm still probably not great at it, but I do notice a lot in general of people who are just very negative. I tend not to really, like, I don't know how to respond to it because they can always sort of have a negative. There's always going to be a negative on a negative. So even if you try to solve one of their issues, there's a negative. You solve an issue, there's a negative, and it's shifting, I guess, the focus, like you said, Mike, to be more grateful that you're able to do this rather than focusing on the problems is probably something that does go hand in hand with the breath and all of that.
Well, it's really crazy. In my opinion, like that isn't a significant mental shift to go from have to get to. What's really interesting is like, depending on your perspective and what you choose to accept as true, like both statements are accurate. You know what I mean? So like, I have to go change a dirty diaper right now. Or like, damn, I get to bond with, my daughter and my son. I know that's something we share right now, right? So like, is it really fun to do the dirty diaper? Like, definitely not if you look at it like, ugh, you gotta, it's probably a 3-wiper, versus being like, gosh, what a beautiful thing that I get to like help my child, like I get to just be my best self right now and give her what she needs, like,
yeah.
And maybe even in conversations with your wife or other people, like I do imagine you just have there's a transferable skill in this centering that you can better assess like what other people need from you too.
Yeah. I think so. Yeah. I guess the interconnectedness of the breath to the centering to the gratitude, all that sort of. But you guys pointed it out here. It clearly correlates. They all basically walk hand in hand.
Shit.
But I had it does make sense. Like if you are centered, if you're you're focused, you're aware, you're not rushing around, but you're able to listen to somebody else or kind of just observe what's going on in their life, and maybe you can better offer a hand. Whereas if you're kind of rushing to do your next thing, you're not really paying attention. Guys certainly do this. My wife will say something, I don't necessarily catch it, and then are you really lending a hand? Whereas if you're centered, if you're focused, because you've taken care of yourself, you're calm, your anxiety is low, then she mentioned something that she needs help with or she's got to do later in the week, whatever, you're there and you're like, oh yeah, I'm ready to do it. Like Friday comes, yeah, I know, of course I will get the groceries. Like you said that Tuesday, I'm there. Like instead of I didn't catch it, I was 15 different other places.
I was simply occurring by circumstance rather than putting my mind where my body is.
Right.
Yeah.
And it really actually, like now that you guys pointed, it doesn't take a lot of work. To be 100% doing this probably does, but if you think like big picture, it probably wouldn't take a lot of work. Like for example, for me, so my wife works Saturdays, every Saturday. She has for 3 years. And so my daughter is 2. So once that started, every Saturday from whatever, 8:39 to about 2:30. I don't know what the term is. You can't say babysit, you can't say watch, but I hang out with my daughter.
Daddy time.
Yeah. And so, like, I know so many people who that would be a burden, and certainly I've been guilty of it sometimes with being like, kind of not dreading it, but just like, man, I have all these other things that I could be doing, but I can't because, I'm with her. But then you think, like, long term, 20 years, I try to enjoy every one as much as I can, because I know in not even 28 years, that's not going to be a thing. That's not going to be some time that we have together. It's not going to be a guaranteed every week kind of bonding experience. And so, like, you try to think, like Mike said, be grateful for it. Stop and not get to that negative attitude and think, okay, this is like a once in a lifetime opportunity that you're going to get to spend with your 2-year-old child. Take them, to a park, whatever, walk around, watch them just run and laugh, like, rather than thinking, I could be watching college football or I could be sleeping in, like, stuff like that. So,
because they're both accurate.
Yeah.
They're both accurate. You could be sleeping in watching college football, but also you are right here.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. I know that I'm right. Yeah.
I love that, man. And I imagine your relationship with your daughter will be superior than it would have been if you didn't have these opportunities, and also be walking this path of personal sovereignty.
I hope it will. And, I don't know if you ever noticed this, Mike. I don't know if you have kids or not, but
only Logan. My
my daughter is a super mama's girl. Like, my wife is definitely her favorite, which is fine. Totally fine with that. But I do notice, like, after Saturdays, like later that afternoon or even early the next day, she gravitates to me a little bit more. She'll pay attention to me a little bit more. Like, whereas normally maybe she'd go ask my wife for something, she'll go and ask me for something. Little things like that I've started to notice over time. And it hasn't, like, increased as the years have gone by. Like, it'll usually by the next Thursday it subsides and she's more all over my life. But you're like, man, that little bit, you could tell, like, it's making an impact. Even if you're not, we're not doing the greatest things in the world. We generally go to, like, a park, and that's it. But you do notice, like, a day-to-day little difference that I think, I don't know, it's really special, I guess.
That's super special, man.
Building the connection. Like, definitely I'm picking up on that for sure. And I'm a huge advocate of, morning routine, as you know. One thing, though, for example, when we go stay at Mike and Shannon's, or when I'm traveling and we sleep in the same room as Logan, I'm intentionally foregoing the morning routine because I want him to wake up in the same room as me and come play in bed.
Mm-hmm.
And then for me, because I imagine that to be more valuable in the grand scheme of things than, like, my morning routine. And then also I talk about, 6-day-a-week habits and making sure you don't become a slave to your personal development, like what you have to be doing. And so, like, I guess just in sharing my experience with both of you guys, like, that allows me to sort of, like, blend two concepts of, where you're talking about, Mike, like, previously seeing something as two separate entities, and then, like, they collide at some point, and, like, oh yeah, now it's just the same thing. Now it's the same thing. So, like, that whole, like, 6-day-a-week habit, I've said that for a long time. Don't become a slave to your habits. And then, like, yeah, even the morning routine. And, like, here's why. Because then you have an opportunity that you would have missed with your son to be playing in bed.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a lot to unpack, but.
Yeah, no, I think you're right on that. And I almost the opposite end of that I see as achieving the same goal. The morning routine, you kind of introduced me to it. I don't do it every day, for sure. I'll be 100% honest. But I noticed that it gives me more of an opportunity to spend time with my daughter in the mornings because I get up, have a little, 15, even 20 minutes, half an hour to myself, cover what I need to do at that point. And then once she wakes up and, we're getting ready for work, whatever, we have that time to spend together and play because I've taken care of what I needed to do. I made my lunch, made my coffee, whatever, rather than when she wakes up, I'm doing it then. So it really achieves the same goal of really, figuring out, I guess, putting, like you guys put it, centering yourself, creating like intentional behavior to be able to do what you want, kind of, enjoy your life the way that you want to enjoy it, I guess.
Totally.
I'm sort of realizing all this in real time, by the way. These aren't things that I generally think about day to day, but you guys are sort of connecting all the different concepts.
Yo, isn't this what you're paying me for? That's what we're doing.
I don't know. Is it? Yeah, I guess so. I guess you're right.
Well, and I'm so grateful to be a part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I've mentioned many times, like, we're just carriers of information, 2 years from now, like, we'll all look back at ourselves in this video and it'll last for eternity. Like, we'll think, who's that? He had nothing figured out. And, like, that's the beauty. But you can, like, find these little nuggets. I know you're putting it together in real time now. So now you're in the know about it phase. Maybe now you write it down in a journal or you have a conversation with somebody else about it. We're having the conversation now, talking about it, writing about it. Like, it's another more difficult step to be about it, but, like, you will. 4 months from now, like, you will be being about the things we talked about right now. And, like, that's why I think that's amazing. That's where the journey is infinite. And it's, you're already on it, is what I'm telling you.
Yeah, for sure. No, I hear you. I don't know if fun is the right word, but it's like, it just makes a lot of sense. Like, a lot of these concepts, some of them I don't necessarily know yet, but a lot of them make sense. Like, once you break it down and these connections are made, it's like, yeah, you're trying to achieve this in your life anyway. Like, everybody wants to be able to spend more time with their kids. Everybody wants to have less stress in their life. Everybody wants to be healthier, wants to be more fit, wants to enjoy their friends and family more, wants to get more out of experiences. So it's like,
so just do it, right? Just do it.
Yeah. And like, these are little tools to do it. And they're not all that difficult. I mean, they're difficult to do all in and be perfect at all the time. Like, that's impossible, I guess, in my opinion. But to change a little bit, to put your phone away, one night a week and just kind of hang out with your spouse, significant other, your kids, whatever, like, even a half an hour of that, like, it does make a difference, and I guess it's sort of eye-opening how much sense it makes. And then when you look back to 6 months, a year ago, and like, I don't think I'm that changed as a person, but like, I start to feel better about some habits that or things that I've done because of that. Because, like, okay, now I think about having my phone with me. I think about putting it away, keeping it up on the counter or the mantle. And it's like, that's certainly a positive change. You can argue with me about it, but it's probably not right. Like, that's just, it's objectively a positive thing, and like, it's not that difficult, really. It's just a matter of, kind of like you guys said, you're carriers of information. It's a matter of running into somebody who has that information. They tell you about it and it hits with you, and you're like, well, okay, I'm going to try this step and, get more centered, I guess, to use Mike's term.
For sure. Everyone's on their own pace too, which is crazy, but like, a lot of people don't know that they're on the pace of finding center, so they never try, or they don't run into somebody that has that information. And like, that's a shame to us. We're like, don't we need more boots on the ground? People being like, hey, it is like, it's the herd of buffalo, like, running off the cliff, and only the people like towards the front of the cliff, or the buffalo towards the front of the cliff, are like, no, we're gonna go off this, but then like, it's going to end in catastrophic death for all the animals. Man, try not to be a pessimist. But, like, my choice is to be an optimist, to be focused on this other stuff. Else, I imagine I would be anxious and worried like the average person about the impending doom. Fact is, though, like, I am not.
I think tapping into connecting the mind to the body and spirit helps quell some of those fears, right? Like, I've brought up paying attention many times. Everything you say, Mike, I'm really enjoying listening to you share your experiences, because little red flags keep going up, like, oh man, he's paying attention to that, he's paying attention to that, he's paying attention to that. Like, you're paying attention to how things make you feel and how that makes things better in your daily operations. And like, if we're just above the shoulders, we can't pay attention to how we feel or how it makes someone else feel, or even the senses beyond thinking and seeing. And so many people are caught up there, and I think that's what creates the herd of buffalo, Kurt. I think that, you think something is true, as we brought up assumptions, but you have to feel it out for yourself. And in order to do so, you just got to pay attention to it. Like, it really comes down to being that simple.
Yeah, I agree. I think, Kurt, you mentioned, like, that it's a shame that there's people out there who, like, I guess haven't been exposed to this information or whatnot. I almost think it's more like something that Mike touched on, is that it's the act of you paying attention and then realizing the effect it has and then kind of following through with that. I almost feel like it makes so much sense. It's such a common sense concept that it's almost more in the doing versus the knowing. Maybe like running into a carrier of information like yourself, Kurt, or Mike, and them talking to you about it, you then have the realization. But like, I think of, if I mention this to somebody that I know, they'll look at me like, yeah, of course, putting your phone down and spending more time with your wife and daughter is a more positive step, But it's like, yeah, but everyone knows this already. Everybody knows Facebook takes up mindless hours in your day, but nobody actually does anything to remedy that. They just sort of accept that, and that's it. Like, this is their life, and this is the way my life's shaken out, and so that's where I am. But it's almost more, I see it, I guess, for me, a lot of these things made sense. Like, Kurt, when you told me that, they just make sense, and everything you guys shared today makes perfect sense to me. It's not really like outside the box kind of thing. It's not different. It's just sort of like, yeah, that's correct. That's exactly like it just is. But then it's okay. Then you have to then implement it. Like, in order to see it, it's not just knowing the information that's going to create the change. It's like, you got to try out the different concepts. You got to sort of take the breaths. You got to calm down. You have to be more intentional. You have to center yourself. Like, that's where you need to put the work in. It's not acquiring the information. It's kind of taking it and doing something with it.
Right.
Me, at least, I don't know.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. The information that I'm, I guess, suggesting to acquire is basically that, like, again, maybe a pessimistic viewpoint, but yeah, that the world, if you just exist by circumstance, you're fucked. And so, like, every opportunity that you have to take control or at least assess what that circumstance is and, like, operate from a place of love and gratitude, from a place of, like, responding versus reacting. Like, in my argument and legitimately in just my super logical brain, is like, yeah, that's a better choice. And then through the reps, like, it definitely is harder to be about it. It helps to have a buddy like Mike. It helps to have, like I had said to you, when you signed up with me. It's like, dude, like the purpose is so I can get the reps to continue to craft these messages in a way that people are able to respond to. And, you know,
my brain realized so fast where the apps that I waste time on are. You go to them enough where your brain starts to make that connection. Now it knows, okay,
right.
Folder down, and you're like, damn, I need a new way to get around this.
Or the timer goes off and you just like ignore for today, ignore for 5 minutes. You're like, oh,
right. Like there's always built-in things just bashing you over the head with, you're wasting your time. Don't be doing this. And you're like, no, not me.
But see, like what I'm getting at is like it's really hard, and it's super hard for forever. I imagine. I mean, you've said a couple of times like discrediting where you're at in this journey, and like, please don't assume that like that it's easy for me or I'm some super like disciplined person. Like you've seen me in action, man. I just play hundreds of mind games. Hundreds. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's all surrounding paying attention. A lot of it's paying attention in the moment. A lot of it's paying attention like on a one-timer, like, right? Moving your apps around, like even simply just like deleting a certain app from your phone once. Deleting a toxic person from your Instagram feed once. You know, and then it just becomes about paying attention and curating the information you do get to choose that's coming in. Because a lot of what's coming in is going to be by circumstance. Whether you like it or not, it will be forever. Likely.
Right.
Totally.
Yeah, we don't even know what the future holds in terms of, technology and stuff. Like 15 years ago, you could be having the same conversation. You'd be doing it in person, I imagine. But you wouldn't imagine that 15 years later, there's going to be devices in your pocket that are going to take up all your time. Like the future it's limitless in terms of that respect. So I guess coming back to centering it, that's why it's important to figure that out for yourself, because the outside factors and variables are always going to be there, but you got to sort of look after yourself, center yourself, like you guys have said, and figure out ways to not be distracted by that, and or live your life the way you want to, I guess.
That's well said,
buddy.
Man. And
beautiful. That's probably a good clip too, buddy. That's going straight to the old Instagram's gonna support the.
Oh yeah.
But dude, even with regard to like how we're spending time on Instagram, like Mike and I are figuring out. Oh yeah, I'm gonna post 4 stories this morning, and then I put the timer on my things. Like I'm no longer on Instagram. Haven't looked at it since 7:15. It just like contributed to a message I believe in, plugged into that mindset for today, and was like, that's what I got out of it. Now, like, let's be the best me I can be somewhere else. How do I play another mind game to get there? Oh, I got to take another deep breath. Cool. Oh, I got to assess where my tension is in my upper back. Cool. Now I have all these little tools that it just happens over time. Yeah. But then you start to realize that they're the same thing. And then, wow, I got a pretty good toolkit.
Hell yeah, dude.
Yeah.
You know,
And celebrate,
picking up the guitar and like finding a little ditty tune that you want to play, just to like turn the noise off for a second. God.
Yeah, I mean I think that's the thing that hits home for me the most is Mike's idea of centering is perfect, and also the idea that all of these things that we've talked about and that go on in your daily life are all related in the sense that your ability to deal with them is the same. Like ultimately, it comes down to the same factors. It comes down to centering yourself, preparing yourself to do it. The breath work I see as like, okay, focusing and calming yourself, and the intentional behaviors. I like that how you guys put that. I never thought about it that way, but that's all of those things enable you to do everything that we've talked about, whether it be fitness, your daily life, managing stress, your health, your eating, your diet, whatever. All come down to doing that first, and then making the right choice there.
Yeah, and they're all moving targets too, right? We only have the same amount of time and attention in each day.
Yeah.
Right. Let's direct it accordingly.
And there are certain, things beyond our. There's a lot of things beyond our control. We all have to work, like it or not. Money, is something that you need to acquire. You just do. You have to pay for a house. You got to pay for groceries. You need to get money somehow. I know there's people that are like, well, I don't need it to live, and what you do, you're like, there's certain things that we live in a society that's like, there are certain structures there that we will never be able to change, unless you become a millionaire and buy an island, and there's certain things you're just going to have to accept. So it's like, okay, I need to do what I need to do to be able to deal with that and not let that get to me. Because you could easily somebody having that just overwhelm them and just completely make it impossible for them to be able to do anything that helps themselves because they're so overwhelmed by, a pandemic or, the desire for more money, whatever. But it's like, that's always going to be there. So you got to figure out ways to do
it. Yeah. Dare I challenge the idea that, like, at any given moment, like, one's happiness be tied to the employer.
Yeah.
Like where you show up to work and put in a day's honest effort, how that should affect your happiness, but knowing that there are just so many options elsewhere, and I can only imagine, like, for somebody who is in a situation like that, who's like hating their job and they're like a slave to this job, so they have trouble seeing opportunities elsewhere. Like, their option is to continue to go to that job and shift the mindset over to getting to go.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's when it comes back to, like, what Mike said. You just need to, because you need a job, right? I mean, the vast majority of the people in our country are going to need to work in some fashion to support their family, support themselves, right? Like, that's kind of, there's very few people who can get by either through independent wealth or through they just accept that lifestyle and live nomadically. Like, there's very few people who can really do that. So then you have to switch it to, okay, I get to, albeit it's a shitty job, whatever, you get to wake up and go, because what does that get you? That gets you money in your pocket, gets you stability for your family, and then it helps maybe inch them along, in their sort of life and journey. But it's, you're right. It's the same glass of milk. It's just, is it full or is it half full or is it half empty? Like, where's your mindset in that regard?
Yeah, totally.
Right. And the argument, like, the thing that we keep coming around to in this distilled essence is, like, the chances of you, like, improving upon your current circumstance are much greater if you do adopt this, set of behaviors and beliefs that, like, you work center out, versus if you're continuing to live in this spiral of, like, oh, fuck, world's out to get me. Because, like, that's true, too.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It is the same glass of milk. But, like, 10 years from now, if you're, someone who's cleaning toilets for a living, 10 years from now, like if they're only complaining about their job and they're one of these people who live in negativity versus the person who's like, oh, it's just something I do right now and I do it the best I can do it. And put my phone away at night, and I am there for my son when I actually have time with him, even though I'm cleaning toilets for 16 hours a day.
Totally. Hey,
and again, it comes down to being harder.
I don't want to stop you two from talking. I have to go, and I don't want to interrupt the conversation because this is such an awesome conversation. But I got to crank, so you two can keep rolling. It'll keep recording. I'm I don't want to stop.
Good. I mean, we'll chat again.
Yeah. I look forward to it, Mike.
End point to this.
And it was awesome meeting you, and I do apologize sincerely for cutting us short on that, but
you're good. I didn't realize it had been over an hour already. So
normally it doesn't matter. I just had something to do tonight, so I apologize, everybody.
Any final words from you then, Robertson? Freaking appreciate you coming on, man. I'm grateful for you, for your influence in my life.
It was fun.
Well, thanks for coming, man.
Appreciate it. Nice to meet you, Mike.
Appreciate it, boys.
Cheers, mates.
Talk soon.
See ya.
Next one.